We left at 168. Ach ma'husa b'chinhi, the bottom paragraph. What is the essence of reflection? How do you reflect? To appreciate what you see. We're talking about to reflect on Hashem's wisdom and what Hashem provides for us in this life. His bonei b'simone chochmas habori babruim v'sharon b'nefesh v'koach hakoros hamavchin. To reflect on the genius, the wisdom of the Creator in His creation, the sharon b'nefesh, and to be able to evaluate them within your nefesh, within your soul. V'koach hakoros hamavchin. So I left off yesterday with the Tzav. Kol Hashem b'koach. When Hashem gave the TorahKalatsky, everybody didn't accept it on the same, didn't understand the same level. Each person accepted it based on his own capacity. Same thing. Every person has their own capacity in terms of what they're able to draw from what they understand. The greater the understanding, the more profound is the impact. The lesser the understanding, so the person understands it to a lesser degree. But if you have in each creation has a different degree of what? Of wisdom. It's interesting. You know, the Mishnah says, Havizor b'mitzvah kala kiva chamura. You should be as careful with a minor mitzvah, relatively speaking, to a mitzvah. Because you don't get reward for mitzvahs. Okay? What does that mean? If you refer to it as kala, so evidently, but you don't know schar and shel mitzvos. Let's say you have something, it's worth $100 million. Something else is worth $1 billion. And you can have both. Are you going to pass on the thing that's worth $1 billion? But it's less than the other. But in terms of its innate value, there's nothing in existence that compares to the value even the mitzvah kala. It's the same thing. When you look at any aspect of existence, you look at a human being, you look at a blade of grass. Even though the genius that you see in the blade of grass is less than the genius that you see in the creation of a human being, but you see it's a realm of genius which is beyond human genius. That's what he says. There is a commonality to be able to see the wisdom of the Creator in every aspect of creation. But it's less. Therefore what? If you have any understanding of what genius is, you're impressed with whatever you see. Even it's a lesser dimension of that same genius. It's interesting. You know, today whenever you speak to people, say, he's a genius. Remember, my Rashiv is a friend of the Baruch. My Rashiva, he had Shas on his fingertips, besides thousands of other Svarim. And after he passed away, a year on his first yard site, somebody had written something about him, and they cited a story that he was visiting Israel, and he was in Hebron, because Hebron was Slobodka, the ones who started Hebron Yeshiva. And being from Slobodka in Europe, he was asked to say a public shir on what the tractate they were learning there. So the one who asked him was, didn't know him from before, but he was told to ask him to say the public lecture on the Masechta. So Marishu said, of course he'll say it. Let's say they were learning Bava Kama, whatever it was. So he says, would you want some time to prepare? Maybe tomorrow? He says, no, I'll say it this minute. He says, see his genius, how great he was, and this and that. That's what it said in the article. You know, in yeshivas there's a cycle. Every 4 years you learn through so many tractates. So if you're within the system, and you're about 70 years old, how many times have you actually lectured on that tractate? Multiple times. Genius. It was genius. Person is, he's a tax attorney. He's dealt with this problem 1,000 times, lahavdil. So he's a genius. Came up with a new insight. What do you mean? Every tax attorney knows that. That's what they deal with day in and day out. What's the genius? You tell me he quotes from every source that exists within the Shas. Okay, that tells me something. So what determines of your evaluation of genius? It's your frame of reference. What you were exposed to, then you know. But if you know what genius is, you know, there's not to be overly impressed. That's what it is. So that's what it is. So somebody once said years ago, somebody learned in Europe, and people really, the next generation was special. He says, you know something? I'm not impressed. Because he remembers that he learned Rodness first. I remember the Chofetz Chaim, this and that, and this and that. Okay. So if you're less than the Chofetz Chaim, that means the person's not special. He's not a tzaddik, and he's not a this. He is that. Because that person, whatever he is, it's a semblance of what the Chofetz Chaim represented. So it's not the same proficiency. But relatively speaking, he's in today's day and age, he knows more than most. So it's a semblance of the original. So as I said, you compare the blade of grass to the genius in the human body. They're not comparable. Creation of the human being. But it's a semblance of that same genius. Because there's nothing comparable to that genius within the human realm. That's the point he's making.
Isn't that what Rashi says of the coin in your data? There's no other coin. You have to,
But there's different, because that's the coin. That's the coin. A coin is a coin is a coin. Finished.
but he said you don't have better than that. And then that's what we have to deal with, the reality. Whatever we have in our data, that's what we...
Yeah, but you have to meet a minimum criteria. Shiva is a Vrachim. What's the story? Harvey, it's a good story for you. As they say, put in your pipe and smoke it. So there was a story when he was about 35 years old. This was in the late 20s. No, early 30s. So he was offered a position in Cleveland, Ohio. This is before Telz Yeshiva was in Cleveland. And so he came to Cleveland, and so there was a whole write-up in the paper, young genius, Europe, and he authored a work. When he was 18 years old, he authored a work on Kodshim and Tyrus. It's called Avodas Levi. The Sefer has maybe 150 pages. So they had a whole reception, welcome to the community. This must be like 1932, 33. And the person who welcomed they had every community had it was called the Vada year, especially out-of-town communities. Somebody was the president of the community, any communal needs, whatever they were. So who was the president? A butcher. Of course, he was a wealthy man. He was a total ignoramus, you know, didn't know much. So he comes into Marashiva comes to his home, they have all the members of the community there, and he says to him, I heard, you know, you in Yiddish, I heard you authored this work, this and that. So he says, could you show it to me? I'd like to see it. So he gives him the Sefer. He had it with him. He said it had about 150 pages in it. And he takes the Sefer like this. He says, Das alles? That's all it is? This is evaluation of the Sefer. So Rishiva says, like you take a piece of meat and you go like this to estimate what its weight is. That's the way he took the Sefer to evaluate what its value was. That's what they were dealing with. This is in 1932. Okay.